really like find your story, because people are gonna love that. They might not even like your music, but they're gonna love your story.
Okay.
And I think that's a big thing. Is like you see that on TikTok and all these things, and I think TikTok is great personally. Like I'm kind of a believer. Like I think it's funny and like weird and just bizarre, and it's just culture. It's just compressed culture.
Mm-hmm.
But people are telling stories there, whether it just be in their like weird videos or whatever. But like the story is what is always going to connect to people, and so I think just be comfortable telling that story. And the most insecure, vulnerable, flawed thing about yourself is likely what will take you to that next level where you want to go.
Welcome, everyone. This is Jermaine Jackson, producer here at Daybreak Star Radio, the only station indigenizing the airwaves. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with a wonderful and established artist and creative, Mato Wayuhi. Mato, it is okay. Yep. It is a pleasure to have you here and get an inside look at your journey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I woke up, worked on some music, drank some coffee, took the transit Northgate down to Westlake.
Oh yeah?
Yep, and then walked around a little bit there. And yeah, I'm doing well. Feel rested. I got a great tour of the space, so.
Nice. So if you could please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them what great nation you hail from.
Yeah, so Hamidaka Yepi, Mato Wayuhi Machapelo, Nahan Iuha Chante Washtea Na Prechiuzapelo, Nak Oyate Mitawa Hena Ocheti Shakoi, Na Tituan Na Washichu. Hey everybody, my name is Mato Wayuhi. I am from South Dakota. I'm enrolled Oglala Lakota. And yeah, I grew up in Sioux Falls, and I represent the Tituan, which is kind of what I've been taught. That's kind of like our OG name. So there's like Oglala Lakota, but Tituan translates to like people of the plains. So that's our specific like our area. And then I'm also white, so that's the Washichu part.
So you call yourself a multidisciplinary artist. So how do music, film, and performance all come together in your creative process, and how do you decide like where to start?
Well, for me, I don't really see a discrepancy between different mediums. It's all kind of flowing seamlessly for me, and I think that's just kind of how I've always thought. And I didn't really have any sort of like access to creativity in the sense of what I do now until later in like high school, because I didn't grow up doing music or making films. I grew in South Dakota. There's not a huge, infrastructure for doing stuff like that. I was always kind of creative, finding ways to let it out, but it just wasn't. There wasn't a kind of like systematic approach to expressing myself, and we didn't have like film club or anything like that. It wasn't until like later in high school where I took an audio and video course and kind of got more introduced to that. So yeah, I don't know. I just would grow up and I would just I would listen to music and I would think of visuals.
Oh, okay.
So that was a really like a kind of simple way of like kind of visualizing and directing in my mind without actually making it, because I didn't know what that even was yet. And so it all seemed very joint to me, every sort of these like artistic and creative expressions. So when I started doing it for real, it didn't make sense for me to delegate in regards to like, well, why wouldn't I do everything? And not in a way of like I'm the best or anything. It was more just like, this is just how my brain works.
Who are some of the earliest artists or people that helped shape your creative voice?
My parents were pretty formative. They like to conceptualize a lot together. And my dad, he had a really big imagination. He would, sit my mom down and be like, Belle, that's what he called my mom. Like that was her nickname, Belle. Belle, I want to start a film company out on the res, and I want it to be a cultural center and a bowling alley, but also I want it to be a recording studio too. So here, if we get that funding and we build it out at high school, and he'd have this like, and I would be in the vision. I was like, whoa. I'd be like 7 years old listening to this. I'm like, this is a dope. It would never happen. Nothing ever happened. But that was sick to me, like having that idea.
Yeah.
And they teach you that in filmmaking. In like, people who worry about budget just need to go and take a nap or something, or have good sex, whatever they got to do. Because like, I feel like people who are too worried about budgetary stuff and monetary things, it's like, no, just like, don't limit that. Dream the biggest you can. You know what I mean? They say that about script writing and filmmaking is like, don't write to a budget, you know? So that's something I learned early on, I think, a little subconsciously with my parents, of like, do not let money stifle any sort of creativity. You can always scale down, but you can tell when people do not scale up in their vision. And so that was something I learned from them, from a creative influence and influential standpoint.
So you've spoken about embracing your connection to South Dakota and Pine Ridge in your art. How has that relationship changed over time, and how does it still influence your work today?
I had such a privilege of growing up in it, so I didn't really know what it was like to... Well, I don't know, like I grew up in inipis and sweats and sundances and stuff. That was very normal to me. So I didn't realize how privileged that was until I left. I went to LA for school, and I was like, oh, not other natives didn't grow up how I grew up.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating to me. And I had this kind of dual citizenship with like being on the res and then being in a city, growing up in a city, and then going to the res and having that relationship with it, which I also didn't really... It felt like a marginalization growing up, because like, you know, you get treated like a you know, dirty Indian in the city, but then on the res you get treated like a white kid or like a non-native. So it's this kind of weird thing. So growing up I was like, oh, but then I left and I was like, wait, I actually had way more access than most people did. I was like, okay, this is actually pretty dope.
We're seeing more Indigenous representation in media, but you've also been candid about not romanticizing visibility alone. What kind of stories do you think we still need to tell, and who should be telling them?
As much progress as we're making, it's also like kind of sticking to some stereotypes.
Yeah.
Which I get, because it's like, I don't think things can always get better. I think it's kind of a continuum of like things are getting worse as they're getting better, and it's just kind of like the perspective that you have on it, you know. And I'm grateful that things are expanding so much for like Indigenous artists and Indigenous voices, and yeah, it's just interesting. It's like at the same time though, there are these like renderings that we're getting of like stuff that it's like, really, y'all, like, why are we still doing this? But yeah, I think there's like so much cool stuff to be made. And some of my closest friends are people who are like trailblazing it, and it's just really cool to see, and it's coming from such a beautiful place of like nothing more than to just create great stories with great people. And my heart is warmed in so many ways. Like I'm acting in this new TV show created by Sterling, the dude who did Res Dogs, and like I'm on set so much and acting, like just working with these folks. It's really cool. Like I'm just like, it's just warms my heart, you know?
Yeah.
And to see, and to answer your question a little more too, it's like being on screen is great, and creating it is great. What I'm curious and passionate about is also seeing so much behind the camera work.
Okay.
Within different departments, but also like producing, like production, like being an executive producer on a thing, because that is where the real decisions are being made, and those are still a lot of non-natives. And there's some great collaborators, and it's not all bad or all good. It's just like there needs to be more people who look like us making those types of like decisions, and that just comes from an infrastructure, getting into these networks and different things like that, kind of like creating that type of power and opportunity for people in terms of like what things are getting greenlit to be able to be made. Because it still is very much this approach of like having to appease the Disney or the big, you know, conglomerates, and it sucks because they can just they might get something up to fine finality. It's like ready to be released, and they're like, no, axe it, because it's just money to them.
Yeah.
And so that can be kind of disheartening sometimes. That's also the business, but the business is malleable, and I think people forget that.
So finally, what advice would you give to young Native artists who are trying to find their path, especially those who may not feel like seen yet?
Just start. I think starting is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Starting is really hard, and I've met a lot of really creative people who are so scared to start because they're scared of themselves. And so I think getting to know yourself is a really good way to start.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just like make. I think don't let there be any inhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
I think yesterday I led a writer's workshop at the event with the Urban Native
Education Alliance.
Yeah. And I encouraged people to think about writing and also creativity as like recess.
Mm-hmm.
Like not a lot of second guessing when it happened in recess. They gave you 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and you had to let that freak flag fly. Like you had to go and play. You had to get it out. That's what I think of creativity as.
Yeah.
Don't second guess anything. Just let the feeling carry you. And you can always clean up after. You can always pick up your toys. You can always Like, you can always exile. You can always go in timeout. You can always do these things. I just think there's such a spirit in creativity. Then I think the best way to honor it is just start and don't overthink what you're doing.
Overthink.
Yeah, and that's like a Buddhist practice too, of like getting into like Zen mode. Like just let yourself get into that flow
state. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just really, really valuable. And I think it's also it's just like a way to reclaim so much too, because a lot of that, I think, creativity was stripped away from Native people and Indigenous people in general and all these different things. So I think that's a great way to do that. If you find the time to be creative, is just like, yeah, start in that regard. And also I think a big thing is like more of a practical advice is like to the narrative of what you're saying. This is something I should have done earlier, honestly. This is stuff that I didn't work on, is like really like find your story, because people are gonna love that. They might not even like your music, but they're gonna love your story.
Okay.
And I think that's a big thing, is like you see that on TikTok and all these things. And I think TikTok is great personally. Like I'm kind of a believer. Like I think it's funny and like weird and just bizarre, and it's just culture. It's just compressed culture.
Mm-hmm.
But people are telling stories there, whether it just be in their like weird videos or whatever. But like the story is what is always going to connect to people. And so I think just be comfortable telling that story. And the most insecure, vulnerable, flawed thing about yourself is likely what will take you to that next level of where you want to go.
Hip hop led me to like learn. I grew up like in the hood, so I didn't grow up with tradition. It started to make sense to me, like, oh, this is what our people do. It connected to my culture by the arts that we do, dancing, writing on the walls.